You know, it's just so funny how desperately the rest of the world, or at least in my opinion, I am of British extraction. My family is Scottish, and almost 100% I am Scottish. And I'm very proud of that fact because my family, this what the English language has always been my family's mother tongue. Hundreds of years before I was born, my family was speaking English and contributing to the English language and all the dictionary and all the usage of the words. So I take pride in that as much as I take pride in being American, and also the fact that um, our founding fathers, they made this country for their kids. They came to the New World as Puritans, and they wanted to start afresh and start a country that they would be proud to pass down to their children, and that their children would be proud to pass down to their children. And they built the style of government in the nation. They built it with Anglo-Saxon people in mind, English people, British people, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And like people say, oh, systems of white supremacy. Really, that's bullshit. What they're talking about when they say systems of white supremacy is that this country was built for white people, and white people feel most comfortable in this country, as they should, as they should. If I was to go to India or Africa, should I feel as if I'm like as if it were my house, that I was the owner of the house, or should I feel like I'm a guest? And I think I would feel like a guest if I went to one of those places, and I would not expect to be treated better than the local population. I would not expect them to go out of their way to learn English on my behalf, for me. And it's like the opposite when people come to the U.S. They expect us to learn their language. They expect us to bend over backwards for them. And really, this country isn't made. It's not for them. It never was for them. It was for Anglo-Saxon, Protestant Europeans, and it's phenomenal. It's worked phenomenally. It's worked so well that we can allow other people, Catholics and other ethnicities, we can allow them to come in at small doses, and we will absorb them and make them into Americans. But Biden opens the border and lets millions in, and all of a sudden, our way of life is getting worse. All the societal and cultural norms that we once had, they're being watered down by people who weren't raised right. Because America isn't just soil. It's not just an idea. It's a people. Americans. It's a peoples that are raised with certain expectations, that are raised with certain societal norms and taboos, and we're raised so that we fit into the society, the culture, because our society is run a very particular way, and especially the government. There's a bunch of positions in the government, and they need to be filled, but they need to be filled by people who have been civilized and raised as Americans. And because they're raised as Americans, they will have the faculties and the abilities to confront any of the typical problems of living in America and running America. Um, and how we treat each other. We get along better because we get along with each other better because we know we're raised more similar. The more similar you're raised to somebody, the better you get along, the better you navigate tougher situations. You don't become abrasive to each other. You know how to stay out of each other's way. And all of a sudden, when people who can't speak English come here from other places in the world, like Muslim places, They have very strict rules that we don't understand, and and they expect us to learn how to deal with them instead of them learning how to not put us out in our own home, because this is our home and it's made for us. So, there is no white supremacy here. What there is a country that was that has a majority population, a majority demographic that's the same, and that this country was made for those people. So of course those people, it's not that they're going to be favored, but life is going to be easier for those people. They don't have to learn a new language to get along here. Their mother tongue is all they need, and they don't have to learn new customs. They're born with the customs, uh, and they know what to expect out of our government. They know what to expect out of our society, and therefore they're much less likely to run afoul of that society. We know what's right and wrong, and the thing is when you bring people in from other countries, they don't always have the same idea of what's right and wrong. In England they have these Bangladeshi uh, grape gangs, and they they don't operate under the same laws as the West does and as the rest of the English do. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. And before we do anything like that to ourselves, we need to get serious and batten down the hatches and get control of our own country and make sure that we're not dispossessed, because without us this country will collapse. These third world people, they don't know how to run their own countries. They're never going to know how to run our countries. Never. They're never going to know how to run America. I mean, and it's stupid to think that you could ship in Haitians and would those Haitians would be able to run our government when they cannot even run their own. They've had over 100 years, 150 years, the first black nation, and they've chopped they have nothing. They have no natural resources. They chopped all their trees down. They're butchering each other, and you can't just plug those people into our government spots and expect it to continue, because what's wrong to us isn't wrong to them. They like there's a really sweet documentary about China and their Belt and Road Initiative in Uganda or in Africa, Ghana, I think, and how you see how they struggle because the people are so different. Their culture is so different. They're not punctual. They show up an hour late. And one of the Asian guys told the black guys and the foreman, do not leave this task until you finished it. Well, they left when quitting time came. When their normal quitting time came, and the Asian, he's banging his head against the wall like, this is incredible. This is crazy, because if only they had worked another 10 minutes past their clock out time, they would have finished. They would have finished. And he specifically asked the guy to finish, to not leave until they finished. And with 10 minutes left working, they left. I mean, that's incredible. Who does that? To me, that blows my mind. You can't get anything done with people like that are constantly stealing. Like when they first got there, they brought their big heavy, their trucks for carrying sand and stuff. And at first they measured the fuel tanks in liters, but they kept coming up half empty, so they had to start using a dipstick and measuring it in centimeters, with the depth of the tank. And making the drivers, because they would steal the fuel. And then if you confronted them about stealing the fuel, they would say, why do you tempt us? Why do you tempt us? That's what they would say, which sounds like a rapist, a rapist saying to a woman, why did you tempt me? Like leaving candy out or something. That's how they put it. And they're not, we're raised Like America is not just, it's not just soil, it's not just an ideology, it's a way of life and a people, and only the people can embody that way of life. If people are the language of culture, culture, it's written in our hearts. If you took every American today, took them out of America and replaced them with Chinese, it would no longer be America. If you replace them with any other people, it would no longer be America, because we're raised with certain social norms and taboos, and we're raised with a certain work ethic in mind. We're raised with a certain idea of how life's supposed to go. We're raised with right and wrong. You do things like the most like to me the true test is do you do the right thing when even when nobody's looking. And I don't think it's not that way in poorer countries and stuff. They haven't developed to that. And when I was a kid, uh, in the 90s and the 2000s, the aughts, the prevailing knowledge was that everybody was interchangeable. That there was no difference between an African, a European, an Asian, and this was right around when all the African countries were getting their independence. South Africa, Zimbabwe, and they hadn't fallen flat on their faces yet. They inherited all these great countries, and not only did they not maintain them, but they actively destroyed them. The railroads and stuff, railroads that like this, the Asian guy in that documentary said, you have infrastructure that was built in the 30s. Like that was high tech in the 30s. Like even in China they didn't have this technology, and the guy was just saying it hurts to see what you've done to this infrastructure you were left, and you just totally neglected it until it fell apart, and you got your hands up like, oh, what are we gonna do? And they're trying to help them get back on their feet, but they can't do it. They don't. The punctuality, that's not a part of their culture. Another thing that's not a part of their culture is maintenance. They don't have words for maintenance. There's never been an African alphabet. Never. And hieroglyphics don't count. They're pictures. They've never created an alphabet. They've never created an international language. And think about this: when you go to if you want to go to college, you have to take one international language. You have to take like 2 years of it. And what are the languages on there? French, Italian, Latin, Mandarin, English, German. These languages that they're transferable. You can learn them by reading in a book. Whereas there are no international languages that have been invented by black people. There's never been a black person that invented a alphabet. Everything they have is borrowed, and that's kind of their problem. Is they have no real culture to pull from. They don't even have ABCs, their own alphabet. They don't have their own languages. It's either French, English, or some sort of a bastardization of the two, like Creole or Patois. But those aren't real languages. They're stopgap languages, and you can't teach them. Like, you wouldn't learn that as an international language because it's useless. You can't go to China and, nobody in China speaks Haiti, but maybe a few interpreters. Yeah, you can get U.S. documents in Haitian, Creole, but if you go to, nobody learns, that's not a language you learn to be an interpreter, because there's only so many Haitians. If you want to be an interpreter, learning Chinese is a good idea because there's a billion of them. Learning Hindu is a good idea, or Hindi, because there's a billion of them. Although there's a lot of different languages there. But learning German is a good idea because there's a lot of Germans and they do a lot of business. But there's and Russian as well. Russian's a good language to learn because they're a big player in the world. But in Greek, things like that. But there is no African version of that. They have no written language. They passed all their history down orally, and like via audio ear. And what's crazy is their history literally, for Europeans, that is, African history starts when Europeans settled there. Because their African history was passed down through stories, but that wasn't, they didn't transfer that to paper. So we don't know what Africans were doing 500 or 1,000 years ago, or two, like there, we don't have documentation like we do with the Roman Empire and civilization, which is crazy. They did. It's like they didn't even exist, at least historically, until people who could write and read came. And I just feel like they don't have the cultural tools yet to be modern. They haven't learned, like, the countries that do good and that industrialize easily, like China. They had a very strong cultural foundation to draw from. Same thing with Japan. And like I heard the stat the other day, when we rounded up, I don't know, it was like 2 million Japanese and put them in internment camps in World War II. Not one single murder occurred. Not one murder occurred in like 2 years, with people living in what's basically a concentration camp. I mean, you're concentrating people in one place to make them easier to deal with, shipping or whatever you're going to do. But not one Japanese person killed another Japanese person. That's because they have a culture. They all had a shared culture that they could cling to even when times were tough. There were taboos. You still couldn't do certain things. You couldn't be violent in public and stuff. They still held those standards. And that's something that the Africans don't have. And it's not that the white man cheated it from them either, because yes, when a lot of Africans were imported to other countries, they were imported amongst other tribes, so they couldn't really they couldn't communicate and coordinate breakouts and stuff, because they were all from different tribes, which are like different peoples. So it's like the difference between Germany and Italy, and so they didn't get a chance to really to come across this stuff on their own culturally. So they're either going to have to adopt a synthetic culture, or they're going to have to start making one that's prosperous, because the one they have right now is not prosperous. There's not one, like, no sub-Saharan African country is doing very well. And honestly, like, if we want America to continue doing well, we'd better make sure that the majority doesn't get displaced. The European majority doesn't get displaced into the minority, because we're the ones that carry the culture that holds this whole country up. Like like the fact that we're the majority and we have a shared cultural norm. That's what holds the country up. That's what keeps it glued together. If we were to fall into the majority, like 30% or something, it all would be lost, because we wouldn't have a hammerlock on the culture anymore. It wouldn't be, because right now we have a hammerlock on it. And not only that, but people, like, right now we have over 60% majority. It's our way or the highway, and we need to start leaning into that fact. Other people, other demographics, they want to like pick fights with the majority, not realizing that we can beat them always. They don't compare with us when it comes to sheer numbers, and we need to use that to our advantage while we still have it. And we need kick out the people, the ne'er-do-wells, the incorrigibles, the people that don't want to get with the program, and figure out how to get the people that are citizens already to figure out how to teach them to get with the program. But we really do need to use our own, the fact that if anything happens, we're going to win in the end. Because we're the majority, we're the dominant, we have the dominant culture. And it's important too, because that's why you can walk down the street without worrying about getting mugged in most places. Now, if you go to an ethnic majority or a ghetto, it's going to be different, and they treat each other worse than anybody treats them. They kill each other like flies, no matter where they are on Earth, and it's because they don't really they're not taught the value of human life. Human life, it's meh. Especially where they come from, these third world countries. There's so many people. To kill one person means nothing. They're police. They're murderers over there. The police and all in these countries in Africa, they just as soon as shoot you as arrest you. And when you come here, our police officers, they take your safety extremely serious, because they understand they don't want to lose their life, and they can only imagine what it would be like. So we're very civilized, we're very cultured. This country, we have a very good culture. We raise our kids right, and we need to stand up for that culture. Quit letting other people tell us that we have no culture, and even if we do have a culture, that it's toxic, because that's a lie. Our culture is what made this country great. It's what has helped so many other countries become great. The whole Western culture. Uh, I think we've done it. We've gone a little too far. When it comes to women, they have a bit of an outsized voice. They shouldn't have such a large voice as they do, or at least they should have an equal voice to men. Maybe like it's 3/4 of a vote or something. I don't know, but honestly, our culture and the future of our culture lives within us, in Americans. And the only way that it continues also is that we have children and raise them as Americans, with our culture front and center. George Washington, the founding fathers, the Pledge of Allegiance, national anthem, the 4th of July, baseball, hot dogs, hamburgers, uh, safe streets, uh, uh, cheerfulness, being cheery and amiable when people come up to you. That stuff is very American. And turn the other cheek, and like charity. It's so American. And people that they freak out that we're trying to focus on ourselves and get our own house in order, so that we can continue to be charitable to the world. But as it stands now, if we keep going down the way we are, we're going to be a shithole just like everybody else, and we're not going to be able to help them, because like South Africa and Zimbabwe, they used to feed all of Africa. Now they can't even feed themselves. And that's kind of the danger of letting these other cultures and ethnicities come in and start setting up little enclaves. Is their culture is it doesn't mesh well with ours, and they see us as marks, as people to take advantage of, that because they take our kindness for weakness, and truly they take our kindness for weakness. And I think that we just need to we need to find our American values again, and start advocating for those values all over here, England, around the world. And we also need to, those values are so important. They really are. That's what makes America great. And we need to hang on to them. We need to pass them down. Uh, Other than that, we'll be a dead duck. Because nobody else can run this country and you know, uh, keep it on top like we can. Like, like the white Anglo-Saxon culture of America, and like, because we truly are the heart and soul. And I'm not saying that, nobody else is. Many people, many different groups are the same as we are, and they do well here, they thrive here, and that's why so many people come here. Like Indians, they're not from the same culture as we are, but their culture meshes really well with ours, and they fit right in. They do well, minus this guy that in Florida wrecked and killed those three people with his tractor trailer. But other than that, they become doctors. They do well. Same thing with Asians. Most Asians, they do very well. Their cultures mesh very well, and they do most excellent. Europe is the same way. We get people from Europe. They mesh very well. They do excellent. And there's several places from South America and Central America where they come here and they do very well. But these Middle Eastern people, these the African people, the Middle Easterns, it's like they want to take. They all have their own countries, but they want to come here and take our country from us. The only country we have, truly, the only country we have. And it's such a great country, especially for people like me, for people like you, for Americans, that abide by the rules. It's such a great country, so much opportunity. And if we let them ruin it, they will ruin it. They're jealous of what we have. They already took back all the colonies, and then the colonies fall flat on their faces. Now they've turned their eyes on our countries themselves. And the same thing with Europe. It's like, they take over their own country, they run it into the ground, they say, well, this didn't work out. Maybe if we take over America proper, or Canada proper, or Europe proper, every place in Europe, maybe then, we can just slip in and take over the controls and we'll be good to go. But that's not the case. They'll just turn it into a hellscape the way they did with every other colony, everything we've ever given them as Europeans. Everything they've ever been given, they just totally destroyed it. The Indians didn't, and they're doing fantastic because of that. And it just shows you the difference that, having a good modern culture or an old culture that fits the modern world, that means so much. Because you can see all the countries that don't have it. They've been trying to develop for half a century. In Africa and South America, and it's just bad culture. And it's not that it's bad culture. I don't want to say it's bad. It just doesn't work well with us. It's like, it's not my definition of a good culture. It may be theirs, but to each his own. If they want to live in their own countries, that's fine. But it's not something that I want to be a part of. It's not something that suits me. America suits me, and all the other Anglo countries, Australia, England, they would suit me. And I'm sure some of these other countries, they suit the people that live there, because it's their culture. But it's not. It's not what I would want to live in. And our forefathers, they built a country tailor-made for me, tailor-made for their children. They made it specifically for their children and white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and anybody else who wants to join and wants to follow the rules, they're welcome to. And it's the same thing. And blacks, they were forced here, but they lost their African culture. Most of them have adopted American culture, and they do just fine. It's a small group of them that are just ghetto, and they adopt this really disgusting criminal crime culture and victim culture. And we, someday, we'll have to help them get that together. But right now, we really need to focus on protecting America, protecting ourselves and our children's future. And I think, honestly, things are looking up with Trump. That we've gotten rid of the Obama stuff, all those and he's attacking all the Democrats that they've weaseled their way into, all the different institutions, schools. He's suing them all. He's attacking the root problem, and that's what I really like about it. He's attacking the root problem. He's not just attacking the symptoms like he did in the first term. So, things are looking up. They really are. Things are looking up.